The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all, and welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. The X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and Channel 54 on Simul TV. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Before we get to our first guest tonight, Elliott Van Dusen, I've got a little good news to share with you. And in today's society, whenever you get good news, you just have to share it. Earlier this morning, I came to the office to do a Zoom call with one of my colleagues. And the first email I opened up it said 2022 Media Innovation Awards. And I figured, okay, let's see what that is. Anyway, to make a long story short, it reads as follows. Media is highly captivating and transformative industry that plays a significant role in global communications. It is an immense source of knowledge and conveys important influences on shaping society and corporate market trends. As the COVID-19 pandemic has continued, it has accelerated many trends within this sector and has ultimately created upcoming changes as digital has become the way forward. It gives us great pleasure to advise you that XZBN, the X Zone Broadcast Network, a division of REL-MAR McConnell Media Company, has been presented with a prestigious award of Best New Age and Holistic Media Broadcast Enterprise of 2022. Wow. That's what I call starting a week off to a great start. So I'd like to thank each and every member of the X Zone Nation who listens to us, who watches us, who reads our newspapers and other publications, for sticking with us these past 33 years. And it's because of each and every one of you that we won this award. And all I can say is thank you from the bottom of my heart. Wow. X Zone Nation, my guest this hour is a gentleman all the way from Sydney, Nova Scotia. His name is Elliott Van Dusen, a former member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And Elliott, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your service on our federal law enforcement agency.
Well, thank you very much, Rob, and thank you for having me on the show. It has. I'm glad you said that you've been on the air for 33 years, because the last time I talked to you, I was probably 17 years old back in 97, 98. And when I got your message, I was happy to see that the X Zone is still going and still going strong, obviously. So congratulations on your recent award.
Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from a fellow Canadian. And, Nova Scotia is pretty famous when it comes to the paranormal. Shag Harbor, the UFO event. And I had the pleasure of talking to, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but we talked about spooky and paranormal Nova Scotia once, and it was great. A lot of things happening down in Nova Scotia. But tell our listeners who may not have been with us in 1997 how you got involved in the paranormal and how it has affected your life.
For sure. I always credit Unsolved Mysteries for getting me into the paranormal. And the reason for that is I always wanted to be a police officer. And when I would watch Unsolved Mysteries, a lot of the cases would be cold cases or homicide cases. Yeah. And I had an interest in homicide. I knew that I wanted to be a homicide detective at some point. But then every once in a while they'd show like a ghost episode or a UFO episode. And I also found that extremely fascinating. And then a couple years went by. I think X-Files came out in 1993. I never saw it until 1997, but I thought that was really cool to see two law enforcement people investigating the paranormal. So then I created my own organization called Paranormal Phenomena Research and Investigation to start to kind of investigate, strange cases and happenings. I moved to Halifax, and there was a parapsychologist teaching at the Nova Scotia Community College. So I had enrolled in a couple of courses there, and kind of started my formal training in parapsychology. And then I got invited to his organization, which was called at the time the Center for Parapsychological Studies in Canada. So there I got some field investigation experience and kind of continued my education in parapsychology. Went on to do diploma through Stratford Career Institute. Went to St. Mary's University, did a Bachelor of Arts in criminology. Then I got recruited by the RCMP, went to Regina, did my 6 months training, and then I got posted to British Columbia. I learned fairly quickly after joining the police that you don't talk about this type of thing, at least in the RCMP anyway. Like my childhood hero Fox Mulder, I received a lot of criticism, so I could relate to the character very, very much so. And then I kind of stepped aside from things publicly then and just kind of did it privately and from the corner of my desk, and continued taking courses and educating myself in parapsychology. And then about a couple years ago, I decided I knew I was going to medically retire soon, and decided to come back out and started doing podcasts and educational awareness, things like that, and got right back into it. Now I'm fully retired, and this is pretty much all I do is paranormal investigations and research.
One ex-cop to another ex-cop. Do you miss it?
I miss aspects of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was able to get on homicide fairly early in my career, because I joined in 2005 and I got to homicide in 2010. So, I had 5 years service by the time I went to homicide, and I ended up spending 9 years doing major crime investigations and loved it. I just loved those big cases. And, certainly when I read about things in the newspaper, I often think about the investigative process, and,
right.
I do miss that part for sure.
Now, were you posted in British Columbia all that time?
No, I spent 3 years in Penticton, British Columbia, which is home to the alleged lake monster, Ogopogo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never saw him. I often on night shifts would cruise around the lake and go to sites where it had been reported to have been seen, but didn't see anything. Then I went to Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and there was an interesting UFO sighting while I was up there. It happened in a little community called Delaney, and I was on a plainclothes unit at the time. I don't think it was major crimes yet. I think it was general investigation section, but I had heard the story about this UFO sighting over the dump, and it had multiple witnesses and things like that. So next thing I know, the next day they flew the members into Yellowknife to be interviewed by upper management. And then later on, I ended up writing a book with that UFO story in it. And the one thing that I was interested in that I didn't know at the time is after they had flown them into Yellowknife and debriefed them on the UFO sighting, CSIS, I guess, our Canadian Security Intelligence Service, sent an agent up to Yellowknife as well to look into it, which would be, for our American listeners, basically the equivalent of the CIA. So, very, very interesting UFO case while I was up there. And then I got transferred to Chester, Nova Scotia, came home, and did a couple of years down in Chester. Then I got promoted to Corporal downtown Halifax, where, again, I went on the major crime unit.
Wow. And here you are, back investigating the strange, the weird, the bizarre with
Certainly am.
PPRI.net.
Yes.
While you were in BC, any hints of Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
No, had no reports of that. No, at all. You'd hear about UFO sightings for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, didn't see any UFOs. Didn't come across Ogopogo. Didn't have any calls about Bigfoot or anything. But when I was in Yellowknife, a guy I worked with had found out that I was interested in the paranormal, and he shared his experience with me in a small community called Wati. It's about a 45-minute flight from Yellowknife to Wati, and there they believe that there's a Bushman, which is basically
Hmm.
the description of a Bigfoot that lives in that community and is responsible for missing bush camp workers and missing children. Um,
Wow.
and they take it seriously. My friend told me that he used to get called out, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Somebody'd think that the Bushman was breaking into their house. He'd have to go and investigate, and he never. It was funny. He was tired and probably cranky, and he was looking around the guy's house, and there was snow on the ground, and he said, well, there's no footprints. And the guy looked at him like he was crazy and just said, the Bushman doesn't leave footprints. And but they're dead serious. Like
Yeah.
they believe in that. And I ended up meeting another member that had worked there at a different time and said the same thing, that you'll hear strange noises in the bushes that sounds like an injured animal or something similar to that. And
Mhm.
the locals would get all scared and stirred up, thinking that the Bushman was coming. And they would meet in the community hall and bring all the kids there and sound like a little town alarm. And they took it
Wow.
serious. But I never came across the Bushman either while I was up there, but certainly looked for him.
Elliot, you and I have to take our first break. Thanks so much for joining us. And again, thank you for your service as a member of the RCMP. You guys have a thankless job many times, but we appreciate what you've done.
Thank you.
For more information about our guest this hour, Elliott Van Dusen, visit ppri.net, and we'll both be back on the other side of this break as we continue right here from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Exonation, Elliott Van Dusen is our special guest. His website is ppri.net. And Elliott, what does the paranormal phenomena research and investigation do?
That's a great question. So for the most part, I find we receive cases about hauntings involving ghosts or apparitions. But we do investigate anything, UFO sightings, cryptozoology sightings. There was a case many, many years ago of a black panther being spotted in Beaverbank, Nova Scotia. So we took a look at that. Some witnesses had taken photographs of footprints in the snow. And yeah, we would interview Department of Natural Resource personnel and things like that, which say that obviously there should be no black panthers in Nova Scotia, but you never know. A few years ago, they didn't think there was bobcats here either, and they found that there is. So,
Wow.
we'll take a look at pretty much anything. Now we do push parapsychology quite a bit, which is strictly the study of extrasensory perception, which is then broken into a multitude of things such as telepathy and psychic mediums and things like that.
Right.
Then mind matter interaction, or psychokinesis, which is the movement of objects by the mind, or in poltergeist cases, recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. And then the last one is my favorite part, which is survival. And of course, that includes out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, apparitional sightings, ghosts, all the fun stuff, I think.
One thing that I really take my hat off to you for is, number one, the work that you do investigating the paranormal, but more than that is that here you are, a trained police investigator with the credentials to say that you're an investigator. And I would only imagine that you apply the investigative techniques that you were taught how to use as a major crime investigator when coming to the paranormal. And in my opinion, this differs vastly from the majority of so-called paranormal investigators out there. Do you find that your police experience works in your advantage?
It has definitely added to my skill sets for sure. I know one thing I'm better at now than I was, back when I probably first talked to you at 17, 18 years old. is interview skills, because we get so much interview training. You get child interviewing, so
Right.
the ability to extract information from children. You got to be very careful not to be
Hmm.
prejudiced or influence them, and that comes in handy in reincarnation cases, for example. Also, just the investigator process. You learn to look at people's behavior, physical behavior, speech patterns, things like that, stuff that you might not pay attention to if you don't have that training, and even just the evidence. So I kind of like with PPRI. I have one of my researchers are developing kind of protocols, but one of the things that I want to implement is how we look after the evidence that we collect after an investigation. So in the
Right.
police world, there's the chain of custody, as you know, or
Yeah.
um, you have to follow that, because if you lose evidence or misplace evidence or leave evidence unattended for a while, things could happen
Hmm.
to it, which can then taint the whole case. So I started to implement things like that into paranormal investigation. So once the investigators submit their audio recorder, basically to like an exhibit custodian or one investigator at the end of the night, that investigator is then responsible for downloading all the data and then returning the devices to the investigator, so that you just have one person kind of dealing with all the physical evidence, the same as you would with the police in a crime scene. Just things like that to kind of tighten up, protocols, and
Sure.
and uh, try and bring the most integrity, I guess, to an investigation.
How come to this very time, to the best of my knowledge, there is no central data bank that paranormal investigators like yourself do not have access to, information that is shared by other investigators? For example, in the police force, CPIC, we used to
Yes.
be CRPQ we had access to CPIC. If I wanted to run a license plate from Nova Scotia, you ran it. And the information exchange is what helps solve so many of the police cases, because that open and the open access to the information is there. And I've often wondered why that information system has not been created yet for the paranormal.
Yeah, that's a great that's a great statement to make, really, and it's something that we've very limited kind of just started, is a
Yeah.
database map, which is on our
Right.
website, and it's still in its kind of beta stage there, and being
Hmm.
some kinks being tested out. But we kind of want to create something like that where, if you're interested in, say, Sydney, Nova Scotia, and you want to see what kind of paranormal stuff's going on there, that you'll be able to like log into this map and pull up different cases that different investigators have reported from all over, because there's not just different locations, but also different groups investigating different
Sure.
places as well, right? So, um, and we do have an ability to like upload some photographs and things like that. So it's in its early infancy, but that's kind of along the lines like what I would like to see created, because like you said, if you're doing a full investigation, you want as much detail as possible,
Sure.
and those police database systems are very powerful. I've even solved crimes on what they call like street checks, and I know the term street check these days kind of has a bad name, but if you saw a suspicious car, for example, in a neighborhood, you would write that, saw a suspicious Honda Civic at 2
Yeah.
a.m. in this neighborhood, and then the next day you find out, oh, in that neighborhood there was a break and enter. At least that gives you a lead to
Go.
kind of follow up on.
I remember when the MDTs first became accessible in cruisers, that defense attorneys used to accuse police officers of playing CPIC bingo. It wasn't a matter of playing CPIC bingo, but you're just doing investigative work, and like you just gave the perfect example how it worked.
Yeah.
What has been your most interesting case
Oh,
for
definitely.
PPRI?
I'd say it was one of the first cases when I was kind of coming back into the public limelight. So I was still an RCMP officer, and I had come across
Hmm.
a girl I had met on Instagram, and we started talking, and ended up flying down there to meet her. And she was interested in the paranormal as well. She showed me all around Rhode Island. Got to see the real Conjuring house. Got to see
Oh,
the
really?
Snedeker house in Connecticut. Got to see the Devil's Footprints in North Kingston. So it was really, really cool. And she had told me that she had always been surrounded by ghosts her whole life, and that her current house was experiencing some phenomena. And we continued to talk, and eventually I went down for another visit, but this time she invited me to stay at her house, and she again gave me the fair warning that usually whenever she has anyone stay over the house, they usually experience stuff. And sure enough, that trip, right off the bat, I started experiencing doors opening and closing on their own, locks locking and unlocking. Actually saw a doorknob turn about 3/4 the way to opening, and then it just stopped. And I opened the door right away, and there was nobody behind it. And each time I would come back to Canada and then go back for another visit, more and more stuff would happen. There was house flies materializing out of nowhere. We had to buy those fly strips, and within seconds they'd be covered in flies. There was electronics being manipulated, children's toys, fire alarms.
My God.
Eventually, there was so much activity that when I would go back to Canada, it almost felt like a vacation or a break. And I know that's weird saying that as a paranormal investigator, but you were just so bombarded with things, and busy documenting things and taking pictures and listening to audio. And I think the coolest thing about that case was towards the end, we had tried to get the family priest, because the family was Catholic, family priest over to do a blessing and help clear the house, but he wasn't doing deliverance work anymore, which is the proper term for kind of exorcism type work in the Catholic world. But we called a medium that we trusted and was reliable. She had come in, and I had just purchased a FLIR, forward infrared looking camera, and we had physically felt a cold spot and could see goosebumps and hair stand up on my arm and the homeowner's arm, but the equipment didn't register anything, which is not uncommon in paranormal investigations, is that people perceive that feeling, but the equipment doesn't detect it. So then in the book, you'll see a couple of pictures. You'll see one picture of like a pie plate on a bed, and it's hot because the sage, the herbs are burning. And then you'll see the medium across the bed. And then as she's calling the entity towards her, all of a sudden on the FLIR, I could see these dark, distorted footprints appear across the bed cover, walk around the pie plate, and go over towards the medium. And she didn't know this was happening at the time, but all of a sudden she says, I feel like the entity's over by me. And I'm looking at the FLIR, and I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Like all of a sudden, there's these dark, distorted footprints kind of walking across the bed cover, going right towards her. And she said a few more like non-denominational prayers. And then she said that she feels that the entity, whatever it was, departed. And we didn't feel any different, and the roof didn't blow off, and papers didn't fly around the room. And she said normally, in cases like that, there's nothing dramatic, but all she could say was that she felt like the entity departed, and the people haven't had any issues at the house since November of 2018.
My goodness. Now that is in your book that you wrote called Evil in Exeter. Am I correct?
Yeah. So that was the first book that I had written. Yeah. It was just such a case that when I talked to other people colleagues of mine and stuff like that, they said, oh, you have to try and write a book on it. So I did. And a lot of people, I got a lot of good feedback, and a lot of people found the story fascinating.
Can you share with us a story that you collected from one of your law enforcement buddy officers that you found most fascinating?
Oh, the most fascinating one that I love is it was a murder in a small town called Stellarton. And what had happened is the police officer that was working that night didn't know about the murder. So he was working, and they got a call one night from a janitor that was working at the Canada Post office cleaning, and it was closed, and he could hear a loud disturbance occurring upstairs. He said it sounded like somebody was being thrown through the wall. He could hear furniture breaking. He could hear lots of thumping and a woman screaming. So he phoned the police, and it was actually faster for the police officer and his partner to run down the road to the scene than it was to drive, because it was only a couple buildings away from the police station. So they get there, and it's quiet at that point. So the janitor leads them upstairs to where there used to be apartments to rent. and points to the apartment that all the noise was coming from. And they open the door, and the police go in, and they're searching, and there's nothing in there. There's no furniture, there's no person, there's no broken items. The police officer actually had the idea to roll his flashlight on the floor, and he could see a fine layer of dust, and he could see only the footprints from him and his partner, and he could tell because they were police duty boots. So then they went outside and told the janitor this, and he's freaking out, thinking that the police think that he's lying. And he said, well, they must have went upstairs on the fire escape, and the officers went to the window where the fire escape was, but whoever had painted it before had done it so sloppy that it painted over the seal of the window. So it was actually sealed shut. So there was no way that anyone could have accessed the fire escape. And they went back to the office, wrote the report up. The next day around noon, the chief phoned him, woke him up out of bed, and asked him to, explain what happened. He told him the exact same story. And the chief kind of laughed and said, yeah, we got one other call like that before. But several years ago, there was actually a murder in that apartment, and a woman was murdered with a bread knife. So you could just imagine how painful and probably traumatic that would have been, and the type of residual energy that would have left in that place. The chief said that the second call that they had got about that was during the daytime. So that's the other interesting thing about that case is it would be hard to investigate because one call came in at the nighttime, the other call came in during the daytime, and with residual type hauntings, they're described as like a video recording that just replays over and over again. Those ones are really hard to investigate unless you have like a specific time frame. And then of course, in this case, it could happen at any time. So, but I found that was probably one of the most fascinating ones that I had collected.
Elliott, you and I have to take our break now. Please stand by. And Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about Elliott and the ppri.net, just go to their website, filled with great information. We'll be back on the other side of the short break as the X Zone continues with early Rob McConnell from our broadcast center in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. And we're back. Me and St. Catharines, our guest in Sydney, Nova Scotia. You might call this the Canadian hour here on the X Zone. Elliott Van Dusen is a special guest. ppri.net is his website. I understand there's something important happening in 2023 in Halifax.
Yes, we are in the
paranormal.
Yeah, we are in the process of planning the 2023 Halifax Paranormal Symposium. We do have some guest speakers already confirmed. One of them is Chris Stiles, big ufologist here in Nova Scotia. Yeah. He has done a lot of work on the Shag Harbor UFO crash, and I believe the last time I talked to him, he had some information kind of about the secondary UFO story that comes from Shag Harbor in Shelburne. There's always that story that they tracked the UFO underwater and it went off the coast of Shelburne. There's talk of another ship coming down to help repair it, and then the two of them take off out of the ocean. So he said that his lecture next year will be focused probably on that case. So look forward to that. And just trying to lock down a couple other guest speakers. Got a few people in mind, but where it's our first one, I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. So we're doing a one-day event. It'll be a full day.
Smart.
5 guest speakers, and we'll see kind of how the reception goes to it. It's a lot of work for sure, but I think it'll be very beneficial, and it goes towards one of our mandates with paranormal phenomena research and investigation, and that's public education on the paranormal.
Excellent. What is your take on the Shag Harbor incident?
I love it. I think it's almost proud of it, I guess, because they always call it the Canadian Roswell. And it happened in, my home province, and I've been down there, and it's just such a fascinating story. It's, fully investigated by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Canadian Coast Guard. So there's government documents, about this crashed object that they still to this day don't know what it was. Lots of different witnesses, multiple witnesses. It's just a great case. I think it's it's a strong UFO case. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Something crashed in that water, and it's still unknown to this day.
Chris has done a fantastic job over the years on his research and keeping people abreast of any new developments. In your opinion, where is the most haunted place in the province of Nova Scotia?
One of the most haunted spots that always comes up, I would say, is the Five Fishermen Restaurant, which is downtown Halifax. It's an amazing restaurant. It's a higher end restaurant. It used to be a funeral home, though, back in the day, Snow's Funeral Home, and it housed the bodies from the Titanic disaster, and it also housed bodies from the Halifax explosion. So kind of got a creepy history there. A lot of people say when they go to the bathroom, the men's bathroom, they run into a spirit that doesn't like people going there. There's been talk about feeling like a force trying to prevent you from going to the washroom. Last time I ate there, I actually asked my waiter if he had experienced anything, and he said he personally hasn't. He's heard the stories. Said the bar staff will come in the morning and dishes will be broken and stools moved, tables rearranged. But he pointed to his friend that was bartending that night, and he said that his friend had a weird experience. He said one night after close, he was going to the offices, which is located on the floor above the restaurant, and all of a sudden you could hear the sound of metal hit the floor. And when he turned around, all of a sudden there was this like old antique skeleton key that had just appeared out of nowhere and landed on the floor there. So he brought it to the manager's office. So certainly has its history, and it certainly has, current stories about it. So definitely worth checking out if you're in the city of Halifax.
Why do you think some people have been witness to paranormal events and others can be standing right beside someone who's experiencing a paranormal event and see nothing, hear nothing?
It's so true. There's one case I'm thinking of, actually, and Chris Stiles did a great job investigating it. And I actually I wrote about it in one of my law enforcement books, paranormal law enforcement books. But it was in Lower Sackville, and it was a UFO sighting, and it was exactly what you just described. There was one family that saw the UFO and heard this loud noise, and the house shook, and it terrified them so much that they hid underneath their bed. But then the people next door, including the RCMP officer that had attended to investigate, said that they just saw a UFO, but there was absolutely no sound at all, nothing shaking, anything like that. But totally two different experiences, and the people were just side by side to each other. So in cases like that, I mean, the simple answer is I don't know. I don't know why one person would report, a house being shaken and loud noises when the neighbors right next door and the police are not seeing that. You would think you would tend to kind of go with the credible witness, your professional witness, the police officer that's, sworn to do his duty and is considered an expert witness. But I also don't discount the other people's experience as well. I do know from even just basic police training, they do a scenario where somebody will run into a classroom and kind of act crazy and whatever and run out, and then get everyone to write down what they saw, what they witnessed, what they heard, and you'll get 30 different answers and responses. And that boils down to human perception.
A lot of TV shows out there now investigating paranormal events, investigating UFOs, Skinwalker Ranch, and so on. What's your take on them? Are they doing more harm than good, or more good than harm?
It's really interesting, that topic, because I've been involved. I've been on TV, and I did some work with Discovery Channel and History Channel. But with those shows, I mean, I always go about the route that it's strictly entertainment. Recently, a colleague of mine, Daryl Walsh, and I had pitched this great TV show with our producer friend, Donna Davies. It was going to be scientifically based, and one network actually told us that it was too scientific. People don't want to hear that the paranormal doesn't exist or that something doesn't exist. There has to be a scare every 3 to 5 minutes. And they listed out all this criteria. And by the end of it, when I read the criteria, I said, well, this is not a paranormal show. Then this is basically, you're looking for a fiction, like a drama fiction show. And, I sit on, a research panel with the Rhine Research Center. We attend meetings once a week and meet with all the experts in the field, like Lloyd Auerbach and, Jim Horan and all these great, brilliant minds. And there was just no way I could do a television show like that and then show up and look at these people in the face.
Yeah, I can understand that. Listen, my friend, you and I have to take our final break. Please stand by. And X-Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more information about our guest this hour, Elliott Van Dusen, visit his website, ppri.net. And we'll both be back as we wrap up this segment of the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studio in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Whatever you do, don't go away. And welcome back, everyone. Elliott Van Dusen in Sydney, Nova Scotia is our special guest, and he is the gentleman behind ppri.net. First of all, Elliott, thanks very much for coming back all these 25 years later.
I was honored to be requested, so the pleasure's all mine.
Do me a favor, keep in touch. Let's see if we can get some exchange of information going between you and some other people, because I really and truly honestly believe that it's going to take the exchange of information from all paranormal investigators in order to solve what this mystery is. It's just like taking a giant jigsaw, going to a giant table, and everybody who attends this table has a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Working together, we can solve what this puzzle is. And I think that this is one of the major things that's lacking in paranormal and parapsychology right now is the open exchange of information, because everybody wants to be the person with the smoking gun. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do know that they're just starting a movement called the Citizen Scientist. Jim Horan and his partner in crime there, Brian. They really push that, and that's exactly what they're trying to do, because you have all these other eyes and ears out there, going to these scenes and collecting things, but there's kind of like you said, still that old keep it close to your chest mentality. So they are trying to break that down, but I think it'll take some time.
In fact, Brian Lath and Jim Horan and Cindy Little have a show on this network every Friday called Practical Parapsychology.
I did not know that. I'll have to give it a listen.
Yep.
They're great people.
They are. They truly are. And it's always a pleasure working with them. The time has come, my friend, when you and I have got to kind of start winding this down. But what are your final thoughts for the X-Zone Nation listening tonight? What would you like to share with them?
Well, I mean, again, the big thing that I like to promote is education and parapsychology. Right now, probably your best, most reputable spot to take courses is through the Rhine Education Center. I usually take courses every semester because they offer new and different courses. So I love to keep on top of the latest and greatest information. So, I think that reaching out and getting involved in the parapsychology education can really help you with your investigations. It just kind of sharpens your skills. And the other thing that I would pass along is all skill sets, whether you're a police officer like I was, or even I've got a member on my team that's an HVAC specialist. He installs heat pumps. So he's very good when it comes to like air currents and things like that at a place. So you just never know what skill could actually be useful in a paranormal investigation. Obviously, electricians, if anyone's an electrician that's interested in the paranormal, you have a very valuable skill set. So I always push that, because a lot of people don't kind of think outside the box there on those types of things. Where can we
send our listeners to buy your books?
The best place and the fastest place, really, I find is Amazon .com or .ca. But Chapters also has it available online, and they can ship it to you. And any U.S. listeners, Barnes and Noble also has them online and can ship it as well. But I mean, Amazon seems to be the best and fastest way. And then obviously my contact information. You've been promoting that all night. You can find everything you need to know at ppri.net. You can send me an email, find out more about our organization, contribute a story to us if you want. Yeah.
Elliott, I want you to take care of yourself, friend. The best to you and the other members of PPR. Keep in touch, and I'd like to hear how your event is going, and let us know what's going on.
I definitely will, Rob. I'll keep you updated. It's
been a pleasure talking to you again. Take care of yourself.
You too. Take care.
Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, Elliott Van Dusen, visit his website at www.ppri.net. That's it for this hour. I will be back at the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studio in where? Well, very simple. St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And once again, I would like to thank everybody who made it possible for the X Zone broadcast to be nominated to have been the best new age and holistic health media podcast enterprise of 2022. Again, our thanks. We'll be back at the top of the hour. Don't go away.